What's going on, everyone? This is Tony Mars with the Melted Broadcast, where we dive into the unknown, my melted stories and experiences. This is my new platform that you can use to get your story out to the people. If you or anyone you know has an experience of the paranormal or out of this world, you can email me at themeltedbroadcast@gmail.com. Thank you, and welcome to the show. Welcome to the Melted Broadcast, Infinite Vision. We'll open your eye in a minute. Microphone to the witness. Now pull up a chair, take a listen, listen. Welcome to the Melted Broadcast, Infinite Vision. We'll open your eye in a minute. Microphone to the witness. Now pull up a chair, take a listen, listen.
What's going on, everyone? This is Mary Bly and
Tony Mars.
here with the Melted Broadcast. Today we have a very special guest, Natalie Mosley Klenotic, the #1 best-selling debut author of See You Later, a memoir of life calling me from beyond. Natalie became a Navy widow when she was in her early 20s, when her beloved husband Tom was crushed by a weapons elevator while on duty on a U.S. Navy ship. But Natalie and Tom's love and communication didn't end that awful night just because he suddenly found himself in the great beyond of the afterlife. He called her that night he died, and he continued to speak to her for the 30 years since his death. Natalie is here today to tell her story. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Good. It's good to have you. Thank you so much for joining, Natalie. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. You do have a story to tell us, and you wrote that in your book, The See You Later, a memoir of life calling me from beyond. So why don't you just tell us about what inspired you to write that book? Like what went on?
Well, my husband and we began dating in high school. We were high school sweethearts. And I was a fairly shy, quiet girl in school and didn't talk to many people because I had a little bit of an abusive childhood. So I was fairly quiet. And he was new to the neighborhood. He had just moved into a new home that his family built. And we had a fairly unusual beginning. When we started dating and talking, he was a young man of 16 and I was 15, and he was all about paranormal and after death and having multiple lives. And he insisted from the moment he saw me on the school bus that he had already known me in at least one other life.
Wow, that's amazing. And I believe that, people do come into our lives and you never know, but I believe in that. So go ahead.
And that it did. It opened my eyes to something I had never even really contemplated in my life. I was just a young girl just trying to get through my crazy life at home. And it was funny, as soon as we started talking about that kind of stuff, then he would go into other topics and say, well, if I ever died, would you want me to contact you? And I just thought he was weird. I was like, no, that's weird. Like, no, I don't want to even talk about death. I'm 15, you're 16. Why would we talk about that?
Yeah.
And so we just kind of joked about it. And then soon after that, he would write me letters at school, and he would say, I'm going to contact you if anything happens to me. Wouldn't you want me to? And how he would contact me, saying he was going to have to figure something out.
So we did talk briefly, yesterday, and you did share a love letter with me.
Yes.
And I wanted to just touch base on that letter. Now he did write to you, and if you don't mind, I'll share a little bit of that. But he did say that that he felt grateful that you would still love him, and that if something were to happen to him, he would still love you and watch you from the other side. And if it and I believe he was said that if it made you feel better, he would come back in the ghost form. How did when you read that love letter and y'all were kids, teenagers, how did that make you feel?
Well, you know what? As soon as I met Tom Mosley, I felt more love than I had in my whole life, because my home life was not very loving. I never heard the words "I love you" from my parents. I never even got a hug from my parents, ever. And he burst into my life and made me feel so safe and so loved. And even the fact that he was going to maybe be thinking of me after he died, I was like, this guy's incredible. Like, he really does love me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of
So
like, no, go ahead.
it just changed my whole way of thinking. Just, I had never even thought of anything as far as that. And you know what? Sadly, he passed away. And when he passed away, never would I have even thought that he was still going to try to contact me like he had promised in high school.
So something happened on the ship the day that you went to go see him.
Yes. Well, he had called me. He had never, ever called me. We moved from Indiana. He joined, and we moved to a little town called Novato, California, and we had lived there for 3.5 years. And we had a little girl in the meantime. She was 16 months old, and he called me from his job. It was mid-morning, and said that he had forgotten he had an inspection that day, and he needed his lid, his hat, and would I bring it to him? And we only had one car at the time. He had a motorcycle, and we had one car. And so he said, well, thank goodness I left you the car. I need you to bring me the hat. And I said, you know what? My daughter's asleep. She's sleeping. You know, can I come to you later? Or when can I come? And he's like, it's no big deal. Just get here any time before the end of the day. I just need it in order to pass. And so I let her sleep for about another hour, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and wake her up, because we actually had plans that night for a friend of his to come and have dinner at our house. And I wanted to make sure I would be able to visit. So I thought, you know, I'm going to mess up her routine. Let's get her up. So I drove the long trip to the ship, and strangely enough, on the way, my daughter dropped her bottle. And so there's several bridges you have to cross. And so I stopped, got out, got the bottle, got it all situated, got her back drinking her bottle. So that delayed me some more. There was traffic. It delayed me a little more. I finally got there. And as my daughter and I are getting out of the car, I've got his hat, I've got her. I'm trying to manage her up this gangplank that's kind of shaky.
Right.
And she points to the sky, and she goes, Daddy. And I thought, no, she's just, you know, meaning he's up on the ship because we're going up. And I was like, no, Daddy's at work. Daddy's inside. And she goes, no, Daddy. And she just pointed to the sky. And I was like, okay.
Now, how old was she again? You said 1.5?
She was 16 months old.
Oh, 16 months.
Man.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got up to the gentleman that let you on. I introduced myself, the ensign. And I said, hey, I'm Mosley's wife. I'm here with his hat. You know, I've got his lid. And he goes, oh, sure, no problem. I know Tom. Hey, how are you? We start to talk. And just as we start to talk, these alarms start to go off. And the only thing I can liken it to is kind of if you know what a foghorn sounds like.
Yeah. Definitely.
It was loud enough that it made my daughter jump. And so I kind of blew some raspberries on her face, trying to calm her down. And I looked over at the ensign, and I said, what is going on? Should I just go back to my car? This sounds serious. And he's like, yeah, I don't know what's happening. Something's going on, and you should definitely not leave the ship. We can't let anybody on or off when this kind of alarm goes off. I was like, oh, okay, you know. And so, I mean, not even 30 seconds later, the phone rings next to him. And he answers it. And he's visibly shaken now at this point. And he looks over at me, and he goes, his wife is standing here. And I'm kind of like, what is going on? And so he looks at me, and he goes, now, what exactly are you doing here again? And so I explained again why I was there. And he says, you have to stay here. You can't leave. And he just hangs up the phone. And then I know something's happening, but I don't even think it has anything to do with me or my husband. And then my husband's friend pops up from below and sees me standing there and looks like he's seen a ghost. And he goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I just got the phone with Tom. He called me this morning. I've got his hat. I've got his lid. Can you give this to him, and I'll just get in my car and I'll go. I don't know what's going on. And he's like, no, come down below. Let me get you out of the sun. So he takes me down below. And when I walk down below, I'm walking by people that have their hands in their, they're covering their faces, they're crying, they're all upset. And I'm just kind of thinking, I should not be here. Something really terrible has happened. I should not be here. and they lead me into the medic room where his friend worked. And what's weird is that my husband had told me about this elevator weapons maintenance that he had done the month previously, and we argued about it. He told me how he was riding this elevator, and the weapons elevator, you're not supposed to ride it. It's made for ammunitions, period. It's huge. People don't ride it. It's not for people. And so he had described to me how it was being done, and we both knew that's not how he had been trained the year before when he took the class to do the maintenance. And so I got upset at him, and I said, you have to stop doing that. You can't do that. And he told me, he said, I can't say no. You can't say no. This is not like working at a grocery store. I can't tell my boss I'm not going to do that. And so when his friend looked at me, he said, hey, he's had an accident. My first thought was that he had broken his arm. And I said, oh my gosh, did he break his arm? What's happened? And he just said it. He didn't even sugarcoat it. He didn't even try to ease into it. He goes, Natalie, Tom's dead.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I just didn't even know how to react. I just said, no, he's not dead. I said, you tell him to get back here. He's not dead. Because we had been apart so much. When he was in boot camp, we were apart for weeks at a time. When he was out to sea, he'd be gone for weeks at a time. When Desert Storm happened, it was only supposed to be 6 months, and then it was 9 months. But he always came back. And we would always joke about that. I was like, well, you're gone a long time, but you always come back. And so I looked at Brian, and I was like, no, he comes back. He'll be back. And I said, you need to take me to him, thinking I could do something. But I didn't know how catastrophic the accident was.
Right.
So I have no one. I have no one out there. My best friend was on a trip back home. I have no one out there. It's literally, I'm sitting there now. My husband's dead. I'm on this ship. People are pouring in and out of this room as I'm just coming undone. I'm crying. I just can't even understand what's happening. So they put me on the phone with my parents. My mother, ignorantly, when I called her, she thought it was a prank call and said, there's some girl on here saying that her husband's dead. I don't know who it is.
Oh,
and
man.
It was me.
Oh, that must have been really hard, especially not having nobody there with you, and it's such a traumatic moment of your life.
Yes. Yep. Literally no one.
And your daughter's right there the whole time that this is happening?
She was there. And again, in the thick of it, I was bawling. So someone took her from me because I think I was clinging onto her a little too hard. And so someone took her, and at one point I said, where's my daughter? And they said, she's fine. She's down the hall. We've got her. And then she ended up being taken home. The friend that was going to have dinner with us that night, his wife came to the ship and took her back to their home because I was not allowed off the ship. The judge advocate general then starts to come. All of the people that come to do the investigation of a death were coming, and the coroner from Marin County that we lived in was busy golfing, and he wouldn't show up to identify the body and release the body. I was on that ship. I've tried to do an estimate. I think I was on that ship for 3 or 4 hours.
That sounds like that was traumatic, a traumatic experience, and then keeping you there that long. What was going through your mind? I mean, I'm sure a lot of crazy things, you're not sure what's going on, or did you have an understanding that's after you calmed down? What happened?
Yes.
You did?
The one thing, and if I could convey it, I don't think I could convey it properly, is I kept talking to him in my mind and saying, are you all right? Are you all right? Like, where are you? Where are you? Are you all right? That's all I kept thinking. Strangely enough, I was just like, are you in heaven? Like, where are you? Like, are you okay? Like, what happened? Because I was trying to piece together what had happened, and that's all I kept thinking. And then I convinced his friend to let me see his body at the morgue once they released him. I said, I have to see him, or I'm not going to believe it. I have to see him. So that worked. They took me off the ship, and sadly, at the same time I was coming off, they were coming up with the bag for him. And so they took me to the military hospital. And by the time we got there, and again, the time is time is strange when you're going through shock. I don't know if it was minutes, if it was 45 minutes, if it was an hour, but by the time we got to the hospital, they were already preparing Tom, and they told me I could go back in like 20 minutes or so. And so I did see him, and I did get to spend some time with him, and I told him goodbye, and I told him that I would take care of our daughter and that we would be okay. But our big thing in our entire relationship is that we never said goodbye. We always said, see you later. He hated the word goodbye because he felt like nobody was waiting for you at the end of a goodbye. Like that was it. That was final.
Yeah.
So I made sure I told him, see you later. I said, I'll see you later. And so I finally went home. They dropped me off at my apartment, and it was, starting to be dusk. It was kind of dark. And so I got to the apartment, and you really, after something like that happens, you're like, what do I even do now? What do I do?
Right.
So I just kept thinking again, are you all right? Like, where are you? Like, I couldn't imagine my life without him. He was so much a part of me. And so I get in the apartment, and the first thing I did, besides fall into a heap and cry for a while, was to call my best friend in Pennsylvania. So I called her, and in the meantime, between me getting in and calling her, the dry cleaning business called and said that they had one of his uniforms ready, that they had pressed it and sewn on some new medals on it, some new patches, and I was like, he's not here. We can't pick it up. We'll just get it another time. So then I called my friend and spilled into the phone with all of my emotions to her for a little while, and cried, and got off the phone, and then I just went into the other room and decided I was going to fold laundry on the floor of the family room. I took some laundry out of the dryer, and since I was in California, I tried to estimate what time it was in Indiana because the phone began to ring, and I naturally assumed that it would be my parents or some family member from Indiana. So I looked over at the clock, and it said 7:04, and I was like, oh, it's probably them. I really don't want to do all this again and talk to them. But I picked up the phone, and I'd had countless conversations with my husband over the phone because of him being away so often. And so I picked up the phone, and I said, hello. And the voice at the other end said, hey, you. And that's how we always talk to each other on the phone. And I knew it was him, but I didn't want, how do you believe it's him? Like, what?
Yeah.
Right.
And I said, who is this? And he said my full first and middle name. He goes, you know who this is, Natalie Marie. And then I just cried. I was like, what? I was like, are you all right? Like, what is happening? And so we just had this lovely conversation, and he soothed my concerns. He said, I want you to listen because you may not remember all of this. I am all right, and I love you. And I was like, I said, but now I'm alone again. Like, I'm alone. Like, I'm going to be all right. Am I going to be all right? And he's like, you're going to be all right. And he's like, do you trust me? And I'm like, I trust you. And he told me he was sorry that he was not going to be able to spend the rest of his life with me. He said, I'm so sorry we don't get to spend the rest of our lives together. And I was like, I know. I was like, and then I just cried. And it was just this beautiful gift. And as I was on the phone, I began to shiver profusely, like freezing cold. Mm-hmm. And my daughter, we kept a blanket on the floor for her to play on. And I took that blanket and I covered myself with it. And I can still see my legs. They were just shaking. I was so cold. And I didn't know then, but I obviously know now when you hear people's other experiences with people that have passed on or ghosts, that you're freezing. And I was frigid. It was so cold. It was like the Arctic. I was freezing cold. So now I honestly wonder, maybe he was in the room with me and the phone was just the conduit, and that's how he was able to speak to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking right now too.
And that's probably,
right.
I did have, I had that situation before when my loved one passed, and I had, it was cold in the room, and I was thinking about him, and then all of a sudden I got so cold that I felt like he brushed up against my arm. So that could have
Wow.
been, but we remember our things differently. But when you were done with this phone call from Tom, what did you think afterwards?
My immediate thought is, because I've always had diaries ever since I was 7 or 8 years old. I ran down the hallway, like literally ran, because I felt like someone, somehow, I was not supposed to remember this conversation. It was supposed to happen just to soothe me and move me on. I wrote it all down, word for word. And then after I wrote the whole conversation down, then obviously the whole day just spilled out of me into my journal. I just wrote every single thing. But because I had always had a journal, my first instinct was, I have to get this down. I'm going to forget this or something's going to happen. So I noted it all down.
Yeah, kudos to that, because I'm a very firm believer that if you have dreams like that, and if you can remember them, or if something happened to you while you're awake, like to write them down, because that's exactly what I did, was write everything down. So
Smart.
I'm glad you have those, because those are memories that you will always remember, because of the fact that you were wit enough to go and start writing these things down, so that you would not forget every moment.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things that it's my crutch, because I have a really good memory, but there are memories in those journals that I'll read and I'm like, I don't know that I would remember this had I not written it down.
Right. So good job on writing all that down, because now you do have those, and you do. I know your daughter now is older now. Does she know now about the phone call? Have y'all discussed anything about that?
She has known since she was old enough to understand. I told her when she was very little. I would say probably when she was about 2.5, because she would always say, Daddy's in the sky, because I would say, Daddy's in heaven, and we'd point up, and Daddy's in heaven now, and she would always say, Daddy's in the sky. And so then as soon as she was able to comprehend a little further than that, I told her, I said, well, Daddy called me one day after he died. Daddy called me and told me he loves us and he misses us and wishes he could be here. So she has always known. And then about 2 years after my husband's passing, I began to date. And I met a young man on a blind date. And after knowing him, and I don't know why, I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my husband's parents, I didn't tell anyone this happened. Literally no one. And people have asked me why. And the only thing I can say is that I was not that close to my family, my parents or my brother. And I didn't feel that they would truly accept it and understand it for the gift that it was, because they didn't have genuine love for me. They just didn't. And so I never told them. And then I didn't tell his parents because we weren't very close. And when I met what actually ends up becoming my next husband on a blind date about a week and a half later, I don't know why, but I told him. And I hadn't told anyone. And he just said, he goes, that's amazing. He goes, how did he reach out to you? And I said, well, he called me on the phone, and I told him a little bit about what he said. And he goes, my gosh, he goes, that's amazing. He goes, I can't even, he goes, that's crazy. That's amazing. And I said, well, do you believe me? Like, you believe me? And he goes, well, why would you suddenly tell me that right now? Why would you want to make that up? And I said, oh my gosh. And he wholeheartedly has believed me ever since. He's been incredible about it.
I'm so glad that you have that support system, because I know that, we've experienced stuff too. And I've sometimes I just recently started telling my story, but I didn't do it then because of fear of what people may think, right? So
Right.
For you to have that support system now, I think that's truly important, and that's wonderful. And kudos to your new husband for that, for giving you such support, because I know that you mentioned you didn't have that as a child, and then when you met Tom, that all that changed for you, and so
Right.
then he was gone. And so now that you have somebody, I'm glad that you have that. I just want you to know that there are people in this community that do believe you, and we stand with you, and we're here for you. But I'll let you
Thank you.
finish. I'll let you carry on with your story, though.
Well, and then I think I would like to share, Tom has also shown up in different ways. He has shown up through psychics a couple of times, and I know people sometimes aren't into psychics. I myself was not a psychic believer at all, even though I had a phone call. I still saw psychics as maybe somebody trying to profit off of people that were, suffering.
Yep.
And I went with my mother to a psychic fair, strangely enough, and we were kind of, laughing at some of the stuff and thinking about buying some crystals and like, okay, it feels kind of cool in here. This isn't bad. And we were sitting off to the side, just kind of talking, and a lady got up. I noticed her get up from her booth and walk over towards us. And as she walked over towards us, she was looking directly at me, but my mother chose to answer. And this lady asked if I would be interested in coming over to her booth. And my mother said, no, thanks. We're not interested, and just turned away. And this lady had such a warm and welcoming expression, and her aroma was just amazing. And I just was like, you are so inviting. I immediately just stood there, and she goes, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to you. And she looked right at me. And I was like, do I know you? She felt like I already knew her. And she invited me over to her booth, and I said, sure, I'll come over. And she goes, I need to talk to you because there's someone here that wants to talk to you, or he's making me talk to you. And so I was like, oh, is it, I was like, okay. And by this time, I wasn't wearing a wedding ring anymore. And Tom died at the age of 22, and I was 21. And at this time, I had just turned 22, so I'm still very young. And she walks me over and she goes, I'm not sure that I'm getting this right. She goes, because you're so young. And I said, well, getting what right? And she goes, there's a young man behind you jumping up and down. Oh, and wow. I said, oh, okay. and so I turned around and I kind of smiled. But when I turned back to her, I wasn't smiling. And she goes, oh, he loves your smile. He loves it. He is pointing at you and he is jumping up and down.
Like, choose her.
Yes, and I was like, okay. And she goes, he's telling me that he was married to you, that he's your husband. And I was like, oh, okay. And I really didn't want to give anything up. I didn't want to say like, oh, yeah, I was married and he died. I just went, okay. And she goes, he has no shirt on. She goes, he's standing here in shorts and no shirt in his chest. And I went, yeah, that's him. I was like, yeah, that's like the minute he would be in the door, shirt was off. I was like, yeah. I said, okay, I know somebody like that. And she goes, and he's chewing something and spitting stuff out. She goes, I don't know what he's doing, but it's kind of annoying. And I was like, well, and so I said, well, he used to chew, and I didn't like that. I said, so then he took up the habit of chewing sunflower seeds. I said, those are sunflower seeds. And she goes, oh, she goes, yes. She goes, yes, he's jumping, he's waving, he's smiling. And she goes, you talk to him all the time, don't you? I said, yeah, I do. And she goes, he's listening. He wants you to know that he hears everything that you're saying. He's listening. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so like we had a little longer interaction, but when we left, the amazing thing to me was my mother didn't say a word. She stood there and heard the entire thing, didn't say anything like confirmation or that was incredible or I can't believe what we just experienced. The feeling I got from her was jealousy.
Oh, man.
Yeah, like that it didn't happen to her. She didn't have somebody that loved her like that. And again, I had no one to share that story with. No one. He's pretty incredible even in the hereafter. And he's contacted his shipmates as well.
Yes, so let's talk about that because you sent me some photos and we're gonna have that linked into the video. But I did see some of the photos of his shipmates, and then there's several photos you send me. There's one in particular that you send me, and when I saw that photo, my first initial, and I think I told you this, was, oh, that's Tom. Hey, I'm coming into this picture break too. Like, don't forget me, I'm here. And this is a picture that was taken it was taken on the ship, right?
Yes, it's taken in the same cargo hold that the weapons elevator, the main floor, and that's where he died. That's that same area he died in.
Okay. Yes.
So when I began writing my book, I started posting in some of, there's groups online in the social media for the USS Flint, which was the ship that he perished on. And normally they don't allow spouses in those groups. It's just for the military member. It's not for military spouses or dependents. But they've all been so generous and so kind. They allowed me to join, and so many of them remembered him and were telling me wonderful stories about him, and even things that happened that day in talking to him, which is beautiful for me to get some more last glimpses of him on his last day. And I learned more about the whole story with the elevator and, what we all think really happened. But the guys on the ship, after this tragedy, because proper protocol was not being followed, the elevator was powered down. They shut complete power off to it, so it was unusable, especially while they were doing the maintenance and the sad cleaning and, everything that they had to do after the accident and the tragedy. So the gunner's mate that I've recently spoken to, his name is Christopher, he found me in that group and said, well, would you mind, could I share a story with you about Tom contacting all of us? And I was like, of course, I would love to hear that. And he didn't even know about the phone call at this point. No one did. And so he said, well, some guys and we were kind of messing around down there one time, and we took a Ouija board down there. And he goes, I'm telling you, he reached out to us. He was down there. And he said there was a certain point after this where the chaplain and I and a couple of guys were down there, on guard. They're walking down around the cargo elevator. And 3 loud bells ring from this cargo elevator as if it's being moved, like the warning bells. And he said it's scary. It's like it shocked us. We're all just like, what the elevator had no power. It couldn't have made a sound. He said, so we all walked over, including the chaplain that was there with them, walked over and saw that the power was cut. There was no power. So then the chaplain did a blessing as they stood there, recited a blessing on the elevator. And he said, as the chaplain began to walk away, these chalk guards that they used to block the elevator and keep it from moving all fell down right behind him. And then he said the next night is when they did all the photos down there. So I was like, I'm sure it was him. Like, that was him. I mean, how else can you explain an elevator suddenly having 3 chimes when there's no power going to it?
Easily. That was Tom reaching out to his shipmates.
Yes. I mean, and they all felt it. And this is not something that it's like, a little bit like, we heard about it. He said everyone was like, well, that was Tom. Like, that was incredible. Like, it was an amazing moment for everybody to experience.
Have you had has he contacted you more outside of the psychics and stuff? Have you had any more phone calls or any visits from him?
Not phone calls, but he is in my dreams all the time. I mean, all the time. When I was writing my memoir, it was the hardest 9 months I think I've ever lived through since his passing, because I really didn't let myself mourn too much because I was a mom. Mm-hmm. I had to keep going. I had a little girl. I couldn't just crawl into bed and die. I didn't have a family that would let me do that. I didn't have parents that would say, let us take Hannah for the next few days. You go home and die a little bit. I didn't have that. I had to just keep going. No one ever worried about me. So when I wrote the book, it was pretty much hell on earth. Like, I was emotional. I was a mess. I was reliving all of it. And I had forgotten a story. I had a dream, and he came to me in my dream, and he goes, why aren't you putting this in the book? And I was like, dude, I'm not putting that in the book. That's too private. I'm not putting, he goes, you're putting that in the book. I want that in the book. You have to talk about the time that my mom walked in, and I was like, oh, no, I'm not putting that in the book. So the only reason it's in the book is because he came to me in a dream and told me, you have to put that in the book. That is funny. So,
I think Tom was looking out for you from the other side. I think, when people write books and stuff, and I saw the reviews, every review you have is so good. And I truly believe that it's because of how authentic it is, how from the heart it comes from, how true it is. And so I think Tom was just wanting to make sure that if you were going to do this, then it seemed like you were already doing it, that you needed to put in the little details that you think didn't matter, but he thought did matter. And it obviously does matter to us. So
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's so kind. Yeah, and I do think you're right. And he had a sense of humor, so I would have never put that in on my own. So, yeah.
So you do have another book out, right? And Daddy's Not Gone. Is that what it's called?
Yes, yes, and it is my children's book, and it stars my daughter Hannah, and it is obviously about her father. It's about Tom passing away, and I tried to do something for children's minds. I didn't have anything to read to my daughter for something like that, right? When she was little, we read bedtime stories every night, and we would say prayers or whatever, and I didn't have anything I could try to help her, figure this out. So if I had had a book like that, it would have been monumental. It would have been very helpful. So when I wrote it, I thought, let's do a book that kids can read and not be sad and not be crying, and find another way, have a parent help them find another way that you can still connect to a loved one that's no longer with us.
And with your daughter, did she have like any more like sightings of him, like anything where you're watching her and you're like, what is she doing? Maybe staring at her dad or something.
Yeah, her dad, his first tattoo was something that was very special to the both of us. When we were dating, he came to me one night and he had a bag packed and he was running away. And he wanted me to go with him. And I lived with a murderous father. I was like, there is no way, because if he finds us, he's murdering you. Like, there's no way we can do that. So we talked it through, but when we came into my house, I drew this little love dot on him. And I said, this is a love dot. So anytime I'm not with you and you're feeling like you want to take off, look at this dot. It anchors you to me. I love you. Calm down. So that was his first tattoo. And then his next tattoo was my name. And I hated them both because I didn't like tattoos. I really was not down with it. And so my daughter, the first tattoo she got was when she was barely 18, and it was an anchor with my name on it.
Nice.
And I was going to ask you, did you get a dot tattooed on you?
I have not. I have not gotten any tattoo. I don't have any tattoo. My children are tattooed enough for me. So they've all got it covered. Yeah. And tattoos are wonderful. I love them now. It's great. It's just that stereotype from 1980, 9. And I was like, dude, now you got this tattoo. What are you going to do? But my daughter, she's covered in them, and she is absolutely beautiful. And they look beautiful on her. So, because she is very much like her dad in that way.
So the book was basically, it's also #1 too, isn't it? Daddy's Not Gone?
Yes. Yeah. The See You Later was #1 for 48 hours. And then Daddy's Not Gone, it took a couple of days of being out, but then it went #1 for 24 hours. And that is thanks to my daughter has a friend that's a social worker. And the moment she saw the book, she said, I'm ordering some of these. These are going to be perfect for kids that I work with that have, loss of loved ones. This is wonderful. And so then I kind of ran with it. So then I reached out to a couple of hospitals, and they requested the book. And then my local paper did a story on me and did a story about the donations to them. And then the Ronald McDonald House downtown requested some. Riley Hospital requested. So I've had funeral homes now requesting them. So it's kind of taking off and having a beautiful life of its own. And I think it's going to be incredibly helpful.
I think Tom was really looking out for the both of you. And he continues to do so to this day in the afterlife. That's a beautiful
Agreed.
thing. That connection that you have with him, it's epic. That's a love, that's will never stop.
It'll never end.
Right.
Yeah, I can feel him cheering for me. I feel him nearby me all the time. I feel it all the time. And I know people will think that maybe that's weird or there's no way. I'm telling you, I can feel when he's near me. I still do.
Has it been a while since you've heard from Tom?
Well, I mean, he's in my dreams all the time, but the last real message was probably when I was writing the book last year, when he told me to put that story in. That's probably the last real message. Besides feeling him, like when we decided we were going to discuss about this podcast, you were seconds from calling me, and a band that we love began to play on the radio, and it was so perfectly timed that my current husband Bill and I, it even gave him goosebumps. We were like, "What the hell?" We're like, "This is awesome! Like this is meant to be. Like he is here and he is loving it." Yes.
After that conversation that you and I had yesterday, I went to go get something to eat, and I put that on because I've forgotten. I know the band, and I listened to them back then, and I put that song on, and I was thinking of and it was weird because I felt something weird that was a connection for you and Tom, and I was like, this is just meant to be. This is so beautiful, you know?
And so everybody knows she's a Rush fan.
I know everybody's wanting to know what band was that. What are y'all talking about?
We got to throw that out there.
Love me some Rush. And, it's funny. It's because that was his favorite band. He loved Rush and he loved Boston. But Rush, we listened to like nonstop. And you know what's so funny? On my second date with my first husband, my second husband, our first date, we were sitting in the driveway, and his name's Bill. Bill was dropping me off at home, and I said, what bands do you listen to? And he goes, Rush would probably be my favorite band, and then the next one's probably Boston. And I was like, what?
So you know what that means, right?
Oh, yeah. Like, he was there. Like, it's a blessing almost.
Yeah. I think Tom put a stamp of approval on that.
All those synchronicities.
Yeah, synchronicities. The two books that you have out, I know they're on Amazon, but where can they, for the people who want to know more, because obviously there's a lot that we didn't cover and a lot of details in the book. So they're going to have to read it to find out, where can they find your book out besides Amazon for the two books?
I have a website, and it is NatalieMosleyClinoticBooks.com.
Great.
And both books are available to purchase there. There's links to buy them there. And again, they're also on Kindle, so you can get them in ebook form if you want as well, besides paperback.
Okay. You also have a blog too on that website. I was reading some of that too. So good writings. I love it.
I do. Thank you.
We'll have that information also posted as well for the reader. Yeah, definitely. Man, I would love to hear more. So I'm gonna have to buy the book. Normally I do that book before, but this happened so quick. I knew that there was just something that was pulling us to go ahead and get this done, so that you can share your story.
Well, thank you so much, guys. Your guys, I've been looking at your stuff as well, and I tell you what, it's nice when you have like-minded people and you can just feel the positive energy. You guys are so positive and so great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for saying that. It means the world to us.
It does.
Especially allowing us, to get your story out there on our platform. So thank you.
But wait, I'm not done. This is like a conversation that I don't want to ever end. So I know that you're married. You're remarried now, and I know that you say he's very supportive. But have you shared like every time that you had a contact with Tom, or is it something that you keep
poor
to
guy.
yourself?
Yeah. I tell him all the time, something just happened. Tom was here. Here's what he said. Or, I'm feeling like he's here. Or I would be writing my book and I would share this story with him. And the man is incredible. He loves my devotion to this man because Tom died, right? We didn't get divorced. We didn't hate each other. We were in the thick of the good part, right? We were loving each other. We had a little girl. We had made it out of our childhoods. We were killing it. We were having a great time together in California. So I still love him. He's not someone I, hated at the end. So my current husband, he understands and loves how much I'm still loving this guy's memory. And when I wrote the book, I didn't write it to get my childhood out there. I didn't write it to get back at my parents. I really didn't, because I know they're broken people and they have their own issues. And maybe they shouldn't have been parents, and that's fine. I wrote it because I wanted people to know Tom. I wrote it with him in my forefront of my mind the entire time, that I wanted people to know this super unusual, cool guy that I got to spend my life with. He saved me and taught me a whole different way to think.
And have your parents read the book? And if they have, what was their feedback on it? Or if you got any feedback at all?
don't know that they've read the book. My mother has been out of my life for 13 years. My parents decided not to show up to my daughter's high school graduation because obviously we have a bit of a toxic relationship. They didn't show up. And so when I called them out on it, my mother insisted that she was going to fix it and make everything better, and then I never heard from her again. And when I published that I was an author on a social media site, my mother saw it and reached out to me and asked what I was writing about. And I told her, I said, I'm just writing about Tom dying. Because at that time, that's all I really had in mind. And after the book was published, she reached out again. And I said, you know what, please get back to me, but after you read the book, because you might feel some kind of way. You know, she kept asking for hugs and wanting to get together. And I said, listen, read the book first and let me know. And I got a text message a couple of weeks ago, and it was some song lyric quote. And I said, you're really making me feel pretty unloved here. Like, what did you think? And so she just said she was free and done with me, and then called me a crybaby.
What? Oh my God!
That is I'm so sorry that you've had to go through that. I trust me when I say I understand where you're coming from on that.
Oh man, that makes me mad.
But I do.
I hate that for you. I hate that we have that in common. But
I do hate that. But I just want you to know that we're here for you. So even outside of the podcast, I'm here. We can talk whenever you need to talk. But I did have a comment / question maybe for you, had you considered. So I was thinking, my husband and I were talking, and we were talking about how we have soulmates, and soulmates not necessarily, that we're in love with each other or whatever, but we have random soulmates throughout our lifetime. Did you ever consider maybe that Tom was from another time, and his job here was to get you to this point in time today? And that's exactly what he was doing in his afterlife.
That's such a deep question. You know what? I've honestly contemplated, like, if he was questioned some way, like who would have to go first, I know without a doubt he would say him. Mm-hmm. And I know wherever he is, he's not up there just chilling. He's going on to some higher plane. I know he is at some other level. And I think you're right. I do think it was his purpose to be here to change my whole life. I don't know where I would be.
Yeah. I believe that. Great job, Tom. Kudos to Tom, because he's gotten you to. I know that it hadn't been easy for you. I know that you've had some struggles, but look at the beautiful thing that you're accomplishing in writing Tom's story. What you think Tom would have wanted written about him. And then not only that, but the book for children that, how to cope with a loved one's passing. And, I feel like you're doing so many great, amazing things by putting these books out there. And just imagine how many people that you're touching and that you're helping with your story, with Tom's story. And he's just used you to write that for him.
Well, thank you very much. I've actually reconnected with several people because of these books that I never thought I would hear from again. Not family members, but former friends. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, but they keep telling me, you don't understand. You are helping me, and you are helping so many people by talking about this stuff. Yeah. And so I do hope that's true.
And that boils down to love, and the love that you shared with Tom and Tom shared with you and continue to this day. It just boils down to love and spreading love and awareness for everybody.
I would agree. You definitely know what you're talking about. I would agree.
I've had experiences. I've gone through some things too, but so I can understand where you're coming from. I really appreciate. Thank you so much, Natalie. We appreciate it from the Melted Broadcast for you being on here and telling Tom's story and sharing those details with us. I know that it was not easy, and I know that you've probably gone through a lot of stuff, and the outcome is beautiful. I just hate that that had to happen in order for us to get to this point today. But you have supporters, you have us, and there's a community out there that does believe you and want to read your books and stuff. So we're going to post all that information on the site as well, so that they can go out there and read them books, okay?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I hope anybody that hears this, please sign up for my newsletter. I would love to hear from you and hear your experiences as well. I love hearing that feedback of what someone has experienced with a loved one that's passed on. It's beautiful.
Yes, it is. And it a lot of, and like you said earlier, some people may believe, some people may not believe, but we know what's real and what isn't, right? So we've
absolutely
had this
right. They're out
experience,
there.
and it is a gift, and it's a gift that we're able to have and cherish when we can communicate with our loved ones from the other side. So I'm glad that you were able to share that with us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys. I love getting to know you guys, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no problem. And just remember, you got new family now, so we're here.
Yes, definitely, for sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Same to you guys.
You're so welcome.
Well,
thank you,
yeah,
and
thank you for
give
coming on
our
the show.
give our best to your children and to your husband.
I will. Thank you
Okay.
guys.
All right,
You're
thank you so
welcome.
much.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
The greats on the one
Too.
who left to hate. Shake 'em up like a quake. All your feelings and turn and dispose them like haters I throw away. I'm forever blessed. Got the spirit that's holy controlling me. I ain't gotta coordinate. I just sit back and buckle my bells and I'm ready to blaze in the stars of my destination. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision.